So turn back to 1 Peter chapter 4 and verses 7 to 11. I'm going to read these verses again because it's a short passage. It helps us to focus in on what we're looking at. The end of all things is at hand. Therefore be self-controlled and sober-minded for the sake of your prayers. Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another, as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks, as one who speaks oracles of God. Whoever serves, as one who serves by the strength that God supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To him belong glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. We looked at last time we were in 1 Peter at this first part of the passage. It's time for change. Tonight we're looking at the next thing here, which is that it's time for love. Keep loving one another earnestly. What's the first thing that you grab in a burning building? So apparently, at least according to Sherlock Holmes, it shows the thing that's most precious to you and that you most deeply care about. Someone shouts fire, the alarm goes off, you grab the thing that matters to you and you dash out the door. A few years ago we had a bit of a dull day in the office, and we set about making a video to show people what to do if the fire alarm went off. Myself and some others, we were the health and safety team. I'm the fire warden, so I get to wear like a fluorescent jacket when the alarm goes off and usher everyone else out the building. And so we made a video of me doing this, but what we did was we showed it all going wrong. We said, this is what not to do when the fire alarm goes off. And in the video, I'm coming up to one of my colleagues. She's got a headset on, she's on a call, and I'm going, the building's on fire, get out. And she's going, no, I've got a call, wait, shh, be quiet, don't interrupt me. I'm going up to some other of my colleagues, and they're playing a computer game on a PlayStation. It was a really dull day in the office. They're playing some game on the PlayStation, and one of them is just about to score a goal in this computer game, and I go, get out, the office is on fire. And they go, no, oh, look, we nearly scored. And they completely ignore what's happening. And then I go up to another guy, and he's sitting there, and he just dives under his desk and puts something over his head and hopes it's all going to go away. And then eventually the office empties out, and the guy from under the desk emerges, and he saunters around the office collecting his possessions. It's like, where's my bag? Oh, here's my bag. I left my bag over here. What's it got in it? Oh, put my laptop in, collect my phone. Where did I put my coat? Oh, my coat's in the cupboard. I'll go and get my coat out, my hat, and open the drinks fridge, take a few drinks, stuff them in my bag, arrange my hair, and he's collecting everything he possibly can before he leaves the office. That's what you should not do. Just in case anyone's not sure, that's what you should not do in the case of fire. You should simply get out. What Peter's saying here to his readers, to the Christians, as he describes them, the elect exiles or pilgrims that he's writing to, he says, what's your priority at the end of everything? Everything's coming to an end. What's going to be your priority? The alarm's going off. It's sounding, you're being marshalled out. What is it you're going to care about? What is it you're going to care about? He's already said to them, okay, that the time for living for what people, fallen humans, want is past. You've got the whole list of stuff that the Gentiles want to do, back in verse 3, sensuality and passions and drunkenness and orgies and drinking parties and lawless idolatry. That is past for you. You're not to collect any of that. But you're now, he says, you're living in a context where he says the end of all things, the end of everything that you have, is fast approaching. Everything that you have, everything that you see around you has an imminent expiry date. All of it is going to come to an end. So in that context, what are you going to prioritize? All the things that the people around you, they want and they live for, yes, that includes the lifestyle of passion and drinking parties and all of it, that's over for you. But all the other things that they want, I'm living for my job, my health, my home, my possessions, my money, my pension pot, my retirement, my holidays on the beach, whatever it is that all these things are coming to an end. The end is at hand for each of them. None of them is going to last. Certainly none of them you're going to be able to take with you. Most of them you'll stop being able to have and enjoy long before you're dead. Eventually all of it will be rolled up and thrown away on the day when Jesus returns. So all of it's coming to an end. Sooner or later, the end is very much at hand. So he says to them, think soberly about what your priorities ought to be. The end of all things is at hand, therefore be self-controlled and sober-minded for the sake of your prayers. Pray about what your priorities should be. Think about what your priorities should be. What is it that's going to really matter? With time running out, what's going to be top of your list as a Christian for how you spend your time? That's the question here. Well, Peter says this is our next point. He says it's this: keep loving one another. Keep loving one another. If the alarm bell goes off in your office and the fire alarm sounds, there's one thing that you probably should focus on getting out, and that's your colleagues. You were there, the alarm goes off, you usher, certainly if you're the fire warden, you usher everyone else out of the office because you care about them. And Peter says that approaching the end of everything, with the end fast approaching, the thing that you should care about, he says, above everything else, is one another. He says one another a few times. You may have noticed in the verses we read. Verse 8, above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. The all there, remember, at the end of all things is at hand. So above all those things, keep loving one another. Verse 9, show hospitality to one another. Verse 10, serve one another. The thing that Peter says you should be focusing on as all the things that you have run out of time, he says, is one another. What are you doing and how are you treating one another? And there's three ways there, three one another's that he's talking about, three things that he's expecting us to do in relation to each other as the end of all the stuff that we have and the things that everyone else is living for approaches. Keep loving one another earnestly, show hospitality to one another without grumbling, and as you've received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards. First of all, he says, love one another earnestly. This is the first way that you're meant to care about one another. Earnestly, in a way that forgives. Love, Peter says, covers a multitude of sins. He's not saying there that if you love, your other sins will be forgiven. He's saying that if you love other people, you'll forgive the sins they've sinned against you. And having that sort of love and forgiveness is going to be really important as you live together as a community of God's people, and as you prioritize things and realize that all the stuff that you have and the stuff that you might be arguing about is running out of time. There's no point really in arguing about what colour the church curtains are going to be, because the church curtains aren't going to be around for that long, but you and your fellow Christians are. Keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers not just arguments about church curtains, but it covers a multitude of sins, Peter says. Love covers a multitude of sins. I think he's thinking here about Proverbs 10 verse 12, where it says that hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offences. Where you've got two people who hate each other, it's very difficult to stop them fighting, isn't it? Two people who hate each other, they will fight. Whatever's going on, they will be fighting. There may be nothing there to cause the tension, but still they will fight. But where you've got two people who love one another, then what you should see is that offences are covered. Those two people that love will cover the way they've offended each other. They will forgive each other, and they will continue in harmony with each other by dealing with the things which are causing those issues. Love covers, he says, all offences. Think of the ways that other Christians may have offended you, or the way they might have sinned against you, or the way they might have just annoyed you. Someone passes you in the church and they sort of look the other way and you think, is that person looking down their nose at me? Someone says something in the church meeting and you go, I don't agree with that. Someone has an argument with you about the colour of the curtains or whatever else it may be. Perhaps someone does something which is actually nasty to you and something happens which is very hurtful. What do you do about it? Well, Peter says, underlying how you approach it is that you keep loving one another earnestly. Love is not a superficial thing which gets dented and removed the first time that another Christian sins against you. You keep loving one another earnestly because love covers a multitude of sins. Jesus has given us very clear ways of how to deal with it when a fellow Christian sins against us. You simply go to that fellow Christian, you explain their fault to them, and hopefully they say, oh, I'm sorry about that, you forgive them, and you move on together. And if they don't, then you take other people with you to persuade them and so on. Paul gives us a very clear framework for the timeliness with which we should do that. He says, never let the sun go down on your anger, doesn't he? And that's saying, sometimes there are things, and someone annoys you, and you can just go, I love them, they probably didn't mean it, I'll simply move on. But if the sun is starting to go down and slowly sink in the west, and you're still going, that person, that needs to be dealt with before the sun is set. You've got a short window in which to deal with your anger against your fellow Christian. And you need to see that person immediately, sort it out with them, deal with it before it starts causing problems. Don't think to yourself, I'll sleep on it and see if it's better in the morning. Chances are you'll be up in the middle of the night seething at them. And probably in the morning you'll start chatting to your neighbour or a different Christian about, wasn't that person nasty to me yesterday? And things will go on from bad to worse. Above all, Peter says, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Solomon was very right, wasn't he? Love covers all offences, but hatred stirs up strife. Don't let there be hatred seen between you and your fellow Christian. Show hospitality to one another, Peter says, without grumbling, willingly to welcome one another into your home, your time, your things. Use what you have. Share your time, share your home, share your belongings with each other. And he says, do it without grumbling. Think about how you can use what you have to benefit and to share with your fellow Christians. It may not be you don't have fellow Christians in the church who are in specific need, but you do have fellow Christians in the church who are in need because they need your time and your fellowship and your encouragement and your help and your upbuilding as you go on in the Christian life together. You can invite them around for dinner and chat about what you heard in the sermon in the morning. You can meet up for coffee and chat about it. You can go around to see them and encourage them. Think about how you can use your time and your home and your car, whatever else you have, to serve one another by showing hospitality. And Peter says, do it without grumbling. It's easy to grumble, isn't it? Particularly when other people disrupt your schedule. You go, I know what I'm going to do today. I suppose I better invite this person for lunch. I think that's probably what I ought to do. But it'll be really inconvenient. It'll be really inconvenient. Peter says, don't do that. Don't grumble when you have an opportunity to show hospitality to someone. Do it willingly, joyfully, because all the things that you have are coming to an end. You're not reserving your home for yourself because your home is coming to an end. Whether it falls down in a few years' time, whether it lasts you the rest of your life, whenever it comes to an end, it's passing. Whereas your fellow Christian is not coming to an end. Your fellow Christian is going to spend eternity with you in the presence of God and of his glory, and showing hospitality to him or her now is a wonderful way to start that. Think about how you can do that. Then the third thing, he says, is to serve one another faithfully. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Each of you, he says, use your gift to serve each other. This isn't something that he limits to the pastor. He doesn't say a pastor or people who can preach use your gift to serve one another, or the deacons had better use their gifts to serve other people. But he says very clearly, as each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. God gives all sorts of gifts and abilities to each one of us. They'll all be one of two things. We'll be able to speak or we'll be able to serve. And there's different ways that we might speak. We might be preaching from the front. We might be visiting someone who's elderly and can't get out and chatting to them and encouraging them. We might be discussing with one of our fellow Christians about what the Bible says. We might be challenging people on things they need to be challenged on. But there'll be ways that you can speak. There'll be ways that you can speak, as Peter says, as speaking the oracles of God. Now, you don't take me as speaking the oracles of God unless I actually am. I think that's the key thing. We've got the oracles of God, it's in here. If I just come up with my own ideas, then don't treat me as speaking the oracles of God. But what Peter's saying is we should be speaking about what God has said, speaking confidently that it is God's oracle, that it is God speaking into the situations that we're in, and it's relevant and applicable for what we're facing. So speak confidently about God's word. Whatever gift you have for speaking, use it in the right context to encourage and build up and help each other. And whoever serves, he says, as the doing, do that by the strength that God supplies. Each of you by speaking and by doing what God has given. Think about the ways that you can serve in practical ways one another, in practical ways helping with what the church, not the building, but the individuals around you, the people around you need. Sometimes that is they need a building that isn't falling down, and so that might be part of how you serve them. But when you're serving the church, it's not about what you do on a Sunday, but it's what you do every day of the week to serve and to help and support God's people. Think about how you can do that. Keep loving one another earnestly. Do this above all, Peter says. This is why it's so important as a Christian to spend time with other Christians, isn't it? You can join a service online and you can listen in, but that's not giving you the opportunity to do this. It's not giving you the opportunity to speak to one another, or to serve one another, or to show hospitality to one another, or to love one another earnestly and cover over the sins and offences that you receive from them. Now, similarly, just coming to a church on a Sunday doesn't do that either, or even turning up on a Wednesday. You have to actually care about the people and actually put yourself out of the way to care for and support your fellow Christians in the church of God. As a Christian, you are, remember Peter says in his letter, you are an exile, you're a pilgrim. But you're not an exile and a pilgrim on your own. You're an exile and a pilgrim alongside others. And that's how God's designed for it to be. You have the same hope as your fellow Christians. In this church here, in other churches in Sidcup, in other churches around the nation and around the world. You and they have a change in what you're living for and a change in what you're speaking about. And however other people are treating you, and these people Peter is writing to are being mocked and maligned for the way they're living, you have the opportunity to strengthen and encourage and urge each other on in the face of that. You're meant to be there for each other. This is why Peter says this is what you'll be doing above everything else. Think of all the things you could be doing and spending your time on. Above all of that, keep loving one another earnestly. And then thirdly, look at what your priority needs to be. Keep loving one another. Why? In order to glorify God. In order to glorify God. Verses 10 and 11. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks as one who speaks oracles of God, Whoever serves as one who serves by the strength that God supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To him belong glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. It's God's grace, isn't it? It's God's grace. It's God's oracles, God's words. It's God's strength, the strength that God supplies, by which you are serving and speaking and doing. Yeah, all of that comes from God. It's not you. It's not you are an exceptionally able person in how you speak, or an exceptionally strong person in how you serve, or that you're an especially gifted person in yourself. But it's God who supplies that. It's God's strength, and it's his words. If you're doing it with your own words and you're not basing it on God's oracles, then you are going to really mess people's lives up, if that's the sort of thing that you're feeding them. If you're depending on your strength and your direction and what you think should happen, rather than what God has told you to do, you're going to really mess up the church. You're not going to help it. If you're not being stewards of God's grace, but instead stewarding how you think things ought to be run or how you think things ought to work, then again you're going to really mess up other people. But by stewarding God's grace, by speaking God's oracles, by using the strength that God supplies, what you're doing in everything is bringing glory to God, isn't it? It's not that you're bringing glory to yourself. You can't be, because it's not your grace, it's not your words, it's not your strength, it's God's. And so as your fellow Christians benefit from what you're doing and saying and speaking, they will be giving thanks to God, and they will be glorifying God, and God will be glorified in everything that you do. His glory will be acknowledged, his goodness, his strength. You've received, as Peter says, a gift, God's varied grace. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another. Glorifying God is the point of everything. While it lasts. Everything is coming to an end, but while you have it, use it to glorify God. And you're only going to use what you have to glorify God if you use it in love for one another. That's what Peter is saying. In loving and serving one another with what God has given you, you're using what God's given you to glorify God before it hits its expiry date, before your home falls down and your car breaks down and you're dead and gone and your money is gone as well. It's a goal which has an impact on your fellow Christians around you, but also will have an impact on the wider world around you as well, as they see what your priorities are and as that impacts them, so that they too come to glorify God. Peter says back in chapter 2, verse 12, he says, "Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honourable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation." God being glorified is the goal, and it's the only goal that's worth having, because Peter says the glory belongs to him. To him belong glory and dominion forever and ever. By using the things that you have to love one another, you are directing the glory back to where it needs to be, back to where it has to belong, in Jesus Christ. Because to him belong glory and dominion, not just now, but forever and ever. In loving each other to serve God's glory, what you're doing is you're doing this. You are working for something which is going to last beyond the end of everything. You're converting the things that you have now, which are running out, into something which is going to last, into the only currency which is going to continue beyond death, beyond the folding up of this universe. You're converting it into glory for God. So to sum up, if you're a Christian, not only have you left the way you used to live in the past, that was the focus back at the beginning of chapter 4, but the things you have now, they're quickly coming to an end. Use the things you have, use the time you have, use the gifts you have to love and serve each other, so that God will be glorified, because it's feeding into this thing which will last beyond any of them, God being glorified through Jesus Christ. And if you're not a Christian, or if you're not doing that, if you're not a Christian, well then there's nothing to stop you using what you have for whatever you want to use it for, but that's not what it's for. It's not what it's for. If you take what you have and you use it for what you want, it's a misuse of what you have. And you'll find that your life ends up broken and damaged, badly damaged. But also it's quickly coming to an end. Those things will run out. They will go. Those things will disappear. And you'll have nothing left to show for them. Convert what you have now into God's glory, and it will remain forever.